Alrighty, folks. Welcome back to the Mushing Alaska podcast. We're your hosts, Brendan and Sean. And as always, a pleasure to bring you another episode. We're excited to bring you our next episode with Rob Cooke. And well, before we get into all that, Sean, good to see you, brother. A little bit disappointed. A little bit disappointed, though. The last time we did one of these, you were sitting like right over here, right next to me.
That was nice.
And well, things have changed. You're back in Alaska. What's good, brother?
Oh, it's nice to be back. It's snowing and very wintry and that's, soothing. It's dark and I'm not mad about it. It was really nice getting to leave the state. And I think it's something that everybody in Alaska, if they have the privilege to do it, to leave Alaska for once or twice in every winter is a game changer for sure. Come back and you have some serious. Excuse me so much.
Bless you. Please let me bless you with many blessings.
But yeah, it's nice to be back. Whereas before I left, I was like, man, it's already getting pretty dark. And it's like, whoop-de-doo, the snow. And now I'm back. I'm like, ooh, the snow. So it's just a nice kind of reset button. And yeah, things are good, man. Things are good. How about yourself? How you doing?
All is good. Just the hecticness of where we are in the year, and
the holidays,
kind of like wrapping up things with on a work perspective. And then like we have our 2-year-old Jess and I, and daycare's out for the next couple weeks. So it's like we've got work, we've got our son home with us. We both work from home. So essentially today is, as we record, is like the last day of freedom that we've had. And then we just go balls to the wall. So 'tis the season though. And got to take advantage of seeing different folks. And so all is good, my guy. Also, I just want to comment here. I'm working on the background behind me. It's a slow process. Okay, Sean, I know you're laughing right now. All right, we got Sean's shirt over here. We mentioned that in the last one. Right here, we got the Cusco 300 hat. I recently found a postcard, Alaska postcard with Denali there in the back. So I'm just going to throw it out there. If there's anyone listening that wants to send your boy like a drawn picture of Alaska or something, essentially what I'm thinking about doing is putting a bookcase behind me and kind of like just piecing things together as we continue this ride of this podcast. So I'd love to start like building a collection behind me. I'm just throwing it out there and seeing if anyone, like, if there's any loyal fans that are like, yeah, man, we got this cool thing to send you. Like, you got your posters in the background, and it's probably easier for you to like find paraphernalia for, mushing and whatnot, but not for your boy. So figure I'd just throw that out there.
I have some backup posters I should have brought you next time. Next time I will. Yeah, I see. It's funny, like the slight changes. It's just like we never have the same thing going on behind us, but one day we'll figure it out. You just like gonna take the postcard and rotate it like 12 degrees, just like some Professor Chaos stuff, just making these slight changes so that people are like, huh. No,
so my idea is actually so with Tiny Desk, right? They have the background, that studio, and they have those bookshelves behind. And when Medium Build when Nick Carpenter went he was playing for Quinn, right?
Or whatever, yeah.
He was telling me that he put like a little, I think it was like a Lego, or I forget exactly what he said, but he put it like on the bookshelf. And I think that when artists go, they keep like adding little memorabilia. So I was like, that'd be kind of cool if like we could do that, or I could do that, at least to like make my home here in Atlanta feel a little bit more mushing friendly and whatnot. So
yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to just do a quick shout out for anyone watching on YouTube. I'm wearing this like tie-dye shirt. It says Indian Pass on it. So last time Sean and I I talked about, I asked him what was his best time here in Atlanta, and one of the highlights he mentioned was an oyster fest we had with our father. And
It was the
well,
best.
Indian Pass is one of like, it's one of maybe one or two different locations that kind of like really popped our cherry with oysters growing up. And so I was just like, you know what? Instead of putting on the Blackhawk expert shirt, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna put on this Indian Pass shirt
Dude,
and think about the oysters.
I'm wearing the same shirt in the same place.
Holy shit, dude. Are you kidding me?
No,
That
yeah.
is insane. Wow. We did not literally no, like we've barely even spoke today. Sean's kind of starting to get sick or maybe starting to feel better. I don't know, but we haven't talked at all. Unplanned. Dude, that is why we are freaking brothers, man.
The back of the shirt. I got my blurry background. Hold on, whatever. You'll believe it. But yeah, I got my Indian Pass shirt on.
Nice, nice. Well, listen, man, I miss you, but I'm glad that you're back in Alaska, and I'm sure you're kind of glad to get a little bit of space from all the like oversensitivity and just like you're. I feel like I said last time, you're just like nonstop going. So I'm sure it's nice to like not be balls to the wall. But we digress. I digress, and well, let's get into things, man. While we while you were flying back to Alaska, the Ace race was going on, and we've got the results, and just thought I was gonna pull up the results, but unfortunately, the website is not working right now, and we'll talk about that in a second as well. But yeah, what was your thoughts on the results, Sean?
Yeah, it's like I think we weren't surprised to see Emily Robinson and Dave Turner up there. I think Jesse Holmes' like handler came in fourth, and but Josh McNeil, that was kind of cool to see.
Yeah,
Um, I wasn't necessarily guessing that he was going to be a podium finish, so that was kind of cool. But yeah, I still look at this event as like it's a social thing, and it's there is some competitiveness to it, but it's not you're winning a few $100 or whatever to get in third place. I think he may be less than maybe like $300 or something. I don't know. So yeah, it was cool to see Josh up there, and then Emily. She's got a fast dog team, and she's going to be doing some longer races from than what she's been doing in like last winter. I think she's maybe a Connect 200. Maybe I'm not
I think
sure.
that's right. I do think that's right.
So that's going to be kind of cool to see. I mean, the reality is like if you have your dog team like trained up to like be in shape, you just go 63 miles and let them go and
Full
let them
send.
run, and it's not like too complicated. But what that's not the belittle the result. Like you got to have fast dogs, and you got to have put in the time, conditioning them. But to see, I'm excited to see Emily do the 200 and see kind of the transition to doing
Yeah.
something a little longer. And some of the new, challenges and variables that come along with that. And Dave Turner, I'm excited to see him this year. He's been like consistently doing really solid in all these mid distance races, and he's just kind of one step away from pulling off something special this winter. So it's good to see him out there doing his thing.
Yeah, man. I agree with you. I'm interested to, I feel like Emily is a name over the last few seasons where we've seen her really do well. And so I'm kind of excited to see her in a longer distance race. At the same time, I have to remind myself, I believe we've discussed she's only 15 years old, right?
Yeah, she's I think 15, and like I totally view her as like 30. She's just like so savvy with the dogs. Her dad Walter is a really accomplished Alaskan outdoorsman, and I'm sure it's a lot of help uh, behind the scenes. And at this point, she's done such a she's done a couple of junior Iditarods and this ace race a few times, and I'm not like I don't even really mention in my head. I'm not thinking, oh yeah, she's like 15. Wow, that's amazing. I'm like, at this point, she's just been there so long for these couple years, and it's like not surprising anymore. And then I got you kind of have to take a step back and be like, oh yeah, she's like 15. It's like kind of like when we're watching tennis sprinter and you see someone like these players that are like getting to the semifinals of a major at 15, 16 years old, and then
Right.
you like wait 4 years, which is a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
they're like they haven't won a major yet or whatever, and it's like, well, they're still only 20, so it's like, imagine Emily after 10 years, she's still only going to be 25. What's 25 going to look like if she's still doing it? But who knows what life will bring, and if it's tough to commit to this lifestyle for for a long time, but we hope that she does. And imagine, Emily crushing it in 5, 10, 15 years, and she's already with the best of them. And it's, a testament not just to her, but to her dad and her dogs. Her dogs are friggin' fast, dude. They're some of the fastest dogs on the planet. Um, and just, we'll see how they do as they kind of transition to these longer distances. It's kind of exciting, and I expect nothing less than success, whatever that may
Yeah, I
be.
mean, I guess the reason I bring up the age is just because from the standpoint of transitioning from like a 50-mile race to a 200-mile race. And I feel like, at least on
Well,
my
she's done
end,
a 150, too. So
that's true. That's what the
two
junior
150
Iditarod is a
multiple. Yeah.
150.
Yeah. So like doing an extra 50 is really,
I guess that's a good
it's almost
point.
a conservative leap of like,
Yeah.
you're just going from 150 to 200. Like that is a big difference, but it's also like a very like gentle upgrade, right? And that's good. It's good to like take your time, and I think a lot of people in mushing really, jump into it, and that's cool. But I think there's something to be said for like enjoying the process, taking your time. Like you don't need to like start learning how to mush, run a 300-mile race the first winter. You know, it's kind of like it's gonna really, I think, pay off to be going and doing these kind of this gentle upgrade in distance. And well, I mean, I don't even know if she's looking to go and run Iditarod or not, or run a 300-mile race or not. But it just you would assume so. That's kind of like the
Yeah.
next progression. And the more people, everybody, even people that are like, oh, I just want to stick to mid distance, like they usually end up like, well, we might as well sign up for the long big one. So yeah, that's kind of what you expect eventually. And this the nice like gentle process of getting just slowly going up into bigger distances, and that's it's only going to be beneficial for everybody.
Nice. Right on. Well, yeah. The last thing I'll kind of comment on the ace race, I saw that there's like maybe a 20-minute video of the post side of the race. I guess they were handing out awards. I didn't get to watch the whole thing, but it looked like a good time. It looked like everyone was just enjoying being around each other, and they were handing out different awards and certificates and such. And um, I was like, man, that would be fun to be in there and like just be grabbing a beer with everyone. And, um, like they're all having side conversations while it's going on. I just thought it was kind of cool. So,
Yeah, it's a really
s-
fun environment in that bar, and the Bondies put together a great event. And yeah, we had a sour note of how it ended. Yeah, it has nothing to do with the event at all, but people always are mushing. I mean, basically, all the lodge is doing is providing like a place to stay, some food, some drinks, and they are sponsoring mushing. They're giving people a place to stay, and they've been a huge part of the mushing scene over the last several years. Uh, and they're not. It's not like they're throwing a lot of money at mushing, and it's not like they get much in return except for our gratitude. And and they just I like promoting that part of Alaskan lifestyle. But yeah, on the way back on Monday, a couple days later, another snow machiner hit the dog team, and yeah, some dogs passed away. It's pretty. I just can't believe it happened again within a month. I think we're all on the same team here. It's like there's a lot of people are like, oh, these snow machiners, this, and these dog mushers, that. And it's like, well, we all kind of want the same thing, which is to be out in the middle of nowhere, enjoying Alaska and wilderness safely and have fun. And we no snow machiner wants to run into a dog team, and no dog team wants a snow machiner running into their dogs. And I think if there is a silver lining, the first incident was a big deal. The second incident, like you never would have thought it would happen right again. And I feel like it's really this like what we're seeing on social media with there's the Denali Highway like recreational club or whatever I saw on Facebook, and they were saying like, hey, this is what the snow machiner should do to avoid this from happening again, and hey, this is what the dog musher should do. But the snow machiners going slower and don't drink and drive, don't keep in mind if the visibility is shitty, then don't only go as far as you can see within reason. Like if you can only see 20 yards ahead of you, maybe not the time to be ripping super fast. And on the other hand, the mushers, getting as much reflective tape and reflective gear as you possibly can so that, they can see you from far away. I tell you what, that reflective gear is understated. It's so, so easy to see from so far away, even in gnarly weather. When I've been mushing or snow machining, you can see a trail marker really, really far away with a tiny little like a square inch of reflector tape. So getting that, and then having your lead dogs have some kind of light around their collar, So I think a lot of good's going to come up with this. You're going to see some more signs on the highway, but it's such a devastating thing to happen again to Jim Lanier, Mike Parker, actually Matt Pavelio. He's been helping out them, so it's like that same group of guys that are Sean Williams. So, a really tough loss, some incredible sled dogs. And it doesn't even matter if they're incredible sled dogs or they're terrible sled dogs. They're dogs, they're dead, and it sucks. And no one wanted it. It's a total accident. You can point fingers here, point fingers there, but ultimately should get together, make this not happen again. Or mitigate the risk as much as possible. You can't. We're still gonna go out mushing, and they're still gonna go out snow machining. So what can we do to share the trail in a safer way? And this is a serious wake up call. And I think ultimately, in the long term, it's gonna get better. And I that's what I'm betting. And I'm an optimistic guy. I think it's really, and unfortunately, the Ace race, Alpine Creek Lodge, there's probably a couple of mushers that got emotional and were pointing fingers at them. Why didn't they do this and they do that? It's like, they're just a lodge on a 130-mile long highway, some snow machiners that were staying at their lodge, surrounded by several other sled dog teams, several other snow machiners all weekend long. They know there's people out there. It's not on the Alpine Creek Lodge. And look, there's some things the snow machiners might have been able to do differently, but it's not like it was intentional. Maybe they were going too fast. Maybe the dog team didn't have reflective gear on. Maybe it was snowing and blowing. I don't know the finer details, but the last thing we need to do is be saying shame on you and shame on you. How can we be on the same team, make this better? And it's a microcosm for just the mushing community in general. There's all this like we do, we're all doing the same thing. We're all love dogs, love the wilderness, love Alaska, you know, and you may have differences about how one person does thing one way and one person does something another way. But, there's got to be that, respect in that, you know, just be yearning for progress, so that's hopefully what we get out of this.
Dude, beautifully said, man. Mic drop on that. I have other comments. I have questions. I don't feel like we need to add anything to that. I think that you really covered it comprehensively. And at the end of the day, you're right. Like, snow machiners are still going to use that, and mushers are still going to use it. And so working more towards solutions and progress is better than tearing each other down. And so let's just leave it there. And so moving on, we've got a couple smaller events coming up this weekend. The Solstice 50, the Knik 100. So we'll kind of be paying attention there and seeing what's going on. Again, kind of similar in the sense of smaller races, and we won't be paying too close attention, but it'll just be interesting to kind of see the results. I don't know if you have any comments on either of those races.
Yeah, I think these are really important races in some ways, not in the traditional sense of who wins this race really matters, or this is going to define who wins the Iditarod or whatever. No, but it's cool. This is all these events: Ace Race, Knik 100, Solstice 50. These are the events that every musher name that you've heard of is probably mostly not in, but their dogs are in it, and they have all these guys. 90% of these mushers have help, that they could not pull this thing off without help, and these guys get to go and run the race. That's a shorter distance. A lot of people's first winter with sled dogs, and this is their event of the year. We're going to go and run 50 miles with this dog team. So I think it's a really cool to see. You're going to see a lot of people's first races and second races, and it's a social event, and it's kind of cool to have this is kind of the people that are in these races and around these races. You might see them in the Knik 200 next winter. You might see them in the Willow 300 next winter. You might see them in some of these bigger races moving forward, but you got to start somewhere. Back to that, how Emily's taking that progress of I do a 60-mile race, 100-mile race, 150-mile race, 200-mile race. Well, you can start right at doing a 200. It's doable. It's not for everybody, and there's no problem with starting with a 50-mile race. The Knik 100 is a stage race. I think it's 50 miles one day, and then 50 miles the next day, with a long break in between. You think you start in the morning and you get back in the afternoon, and then you do it again the next day. So that's kind of a cool way to do a 100-mile race. And it'll be interesting to see how fast you go 50 miles for these races. It's kind of it's kind of almost a sprint race, but not really. So you might see these 12-mile-an-hour speeds, especially the Knik is flat, pretty much. The Solstice 50's probably got some hills, but I'm not sure how much, but it'll be interesting to see how fast because these people that are winning the race are going to be winning the race, and it'll be interesting to see how fast they go.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. I like that. So moving on, little intro to our interview with Rob Cooke. That I really enjoyed our time with him, and I knew nothing about him before you mentioned him. And so the first thing that stood out to me when we had him on is his accent. Having a British grandmother, and then I didn't know. I just assumed
we have a British grandmother, to be clear, but Rob also has a British grandmother, or had one. But yeah, just to be clear, we are 1/4 British. Not saying that's a huge deal, but we'll have tea and crumpets and all that. Go ahead.
But yeah, no, that just stood out to me. And off the bat, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna like this guy. I just like his accent. But yeah, what was your takeaway? What were your thoughts after I guess you've seen him out on the on in a race before, right?
Yeah. I have. We saw him at the Quest 300. We just gotten done with Birch Creek, which is one of those places that can be pretty easy, but a lot of times it's super cold and it's kind of a psychological place because it's winding river that goes, east. It's really, it's got a lot of switchbacks. It's so like let's say the river, if it goes north south, there's all these switchbacks that are going east west. I'm not sure the exact directions, but it's just like if you were to just go straight to the point and not go on the creek,
Right.
it would be half the distance. But you're just going, you know, all these. So it's a trip going on Birch Creek, and I saw him out there, and it was, he was having a tough run. I think maybe I don't know. He's done. What stands out to me about Rob is like he's so experienced. I mean, the dude has run like, I don't know, just tens of thousands of miles behind a dog sled. He's done it pretty much all with Siberian Huskies. Like, that's a rare thing. We talked a lot about why and what's the difference, and it's pretty cool to see someone, it was, I think one thing I thought about him saying was like, yeah, I'm just like this British guy showing up to the Yukon Quest with Siberian Huskies. Like on paper, that sounds like a terrible idea. It's like, who's this British guy? The Siberian Husky showing up. And so he was just made sure that be as trained up him and his dogs to go and do and pull off something like that and do it, not just get to the finish line, but, do it with strongly. And yeah, his dogs are kind of, when you think of the like stereotype of the Siberian Huskies being slow and not pulling that hard and they're like the Hollywood Husky, is what you hear a lot in mushing. Look at Rob's resume. Look at what he's done with his dogs. It's not that he's not just finishing these races, he's beating a lot of teams and he's been doing it for a long time and he's a tough guy, really good with his dogs, clearly. And he's got some great content on social media, just of his, if anyone's been around Siberian Huskies, they just got so much personality and like kind of attitude, like in a fun way. And he's able to kind of give you a little window into what that might be like. So it was cool to like learn about that. And I never really talked to Rob, but we'd met, but I never really talked to him. And it was just a total joy to get to spend an hour hanging out with him.
Yeah, honestly, it flew by. And classy guy. There was a section where you guys just go down the rabbit hole on the whole Siberian thing, and it was super interesting to me because like I just think of Huskies. I don't necessarily get into all the different like types of dogs the way you all do, especially in the mushing world. So it was really fascinating just to hear you guys talk about some of the differences and
I learned a lot.
Yeah, like it was fascinating. I think that you all, when you listen to this, will enjoy it. And Yeah, just like a lot of again, a lot of thanks to him for joining us. We had reached out to him earlier and it didn't work out, so we're glad to get him back on or circle back around and get him. And yeah, I don't know if you have any other thing
Yeah,
you
I
want to
mean,
mention before we.
I think like for all the, Alaskan Husky mushers, I we always joke. We had like a part of the tour that I used to do would be like, you know, we refer to the Siberian Huskies as like the Victoria's Secret models of sled dogs, and or the Calvin Klein models or whatever. But like, I think I've definitely seen, let me put it this way. I've definitely seen some Siberian Husky teams that kind of fit that bill, other mushers. I don't know who, but I've seen them on the trail and you're like, that's not an Alaskan Husky team. But like with Rob's team, it's kind of like, oh, those guys are, like the real deal. And it made me like totally like have I didn't know anything about like what it's like to mush Siberian Huskies. And I think I just gained a lot of respect based on what he's done over years and years and years and years with these dogs and thousands and thousands and thousands of miles. Super incredible musher, and excited to see him out on the Iditarod Trail this year. See what he can do. He's got a really experienced team, and he's experienced too. So, total ton of respect for the Siberians and these guys. By the way, to be clear, his Siberian Huskies are not going to be the same as Brennan's friend Uriel and Elena's Siberian Huskies. These are working dogs, and they're not the house dog of Siberians. And and I think one thing was interesting was when he said, he's got to keep his line kind of like pure or whatever, and can't introduce Alaskan Huskies in, and that's really tricky because there's not like that many Siberian teams in the Yukon territory or Alaska or wherever. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, and it seems like really difficult to do, and like it's already difficult to mush, but it seems like it's almost more difficult. You got to be really particular about your genetics. Whereas Alaskan Huskies, we got, it's not. Some people would say it's a mutt, some people wouldn't, but they've got. The reality is Alaskan Huskies do have German Shorthair Pointers in them. They do have their ancestors that crossed the Bering Land Bridge all the way from Siberia across the frozen Bering Sea 10,000 years ago to Alaska. Those are part of Alaskan Huskies, but there's also a lot of European dogs that came in when settlers showed up to Alaska, and there was intentional breeding and unintentional breeding. And so you kind of have this really dynamic dog in the Alaskan Husky. So it's interesting to see, this more, for lack of a better word, pure, more narrow genetics, narrow gene pool, and still like be pretty freaking badass group of dogs. So just ton of respect.
One other thing, just in hearing you kind of talk a little bit more about it, that also just came to mind was he was referring to how the Siberians don't require as much calorie intake. And I thought that was a very, very fascinating point that almost made me wonder why more mushers didn't consider that, just from like, I mean, he was talking about half the calories almost.
Right.
So that was super interesting.
Yeah, they got
as well.
super thick coats. A lot of the Alaskan Husky coats. There are some Alaskan Husky teams that have thick coats, and sometimes that's like, in some cases that's a huge advantage, and in other cases it can be a disadvantage if you're, the Iditarod, like we've talked about and seen in years past. It can be 40 degrees and raining. It can be super sunny, right? And yeah, but his Siberians are all mostly white, so the sun can reflect off a little bit better than the black, black Alaskan Husky or whatever. But yeah, that was a really interesting point, that he's doesn't have to put his jackets on his dogs unless it's minus 20, minus 30 Fahrenheit or Celsius. I'm not sure, because he's doing the Celsius thing, I guess. But yeah, he doesn't have to worry about as much of keeping them warm and getting 10 to 12,000 calories like these Alaskan Huskies require out on the trail. Maybe he's more on the 6,000 to 8,000, depending on weather, depending on, a ton of variables. And, but yeah, that is fascinating. And I was like, all right, I get it. I get why you would do the Siberian thing, yeah. So that's a pretty good couple of reasons right there.
Yep. So I love it, man. We've done it again. Sean and I were talking before we started recording the intro. It's like, all right, I think we should just do a quick one. I don't think there's too much we're gonna hit on. And lo and behold, we're like, I don't know exactly. I think we're like 30 minutes in. So gotta love it. We pulled a typical Underwood brother thing here. We'll never get this intro down to just like a 5 or 10 minute thing.
That's what the people want, I think.
I think that we just like talking too much. But anyways, well, I think on that note, we should go ahead and transition over to our interview with Rob. Thank you all again for tuning into our podcast. I hope that you guys are enjoying it. We got some big stuff coming y'all's way. The Iditarod's around the corner, and we've got some things coming your way. And I just think you guys need to stay tuned. And if you're not paying attention or following us, just do that. I'm not going to like beat a dead horse on that. But thank you all for listening to this next episode or this next interview. And until next one, enjoy.
Right on. Well,
alrighty. So Rob Cooke, welcome to the Mushing Alaska podcast. Thanks for coming on. How you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, again, thanks ever so much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be doing this.
Right, yeah, man. I remember seeing you in must have been Central, and
Right.
and I had seen you on the trail on Birch Creek, and you were like camped out. I don't know, and there wasn't, you didn't have like straw. Because it looked like it was just like you were pulling over for like a reassessment or something, and
Right.
And then I like got back, then I'm camping my team at this checkpoint, and someone's interviewing you, and I was just like there's Rob Cooke, like maybe I'll say hi in a little bit, and and then she's like, the lady's like, so Rob, how was Birch Creek? And you said, I'll never forget this. You said, quote, "It's got to be one of the most depressing places on planet Earth." And that I just think about that all the time.
I remember when I first did the Quest 300 in 2012. As you know, when you start in Fairbanks, you would run on Birch Creek out to Circle and then run back. And I had two great runs, and everybody had said to me that Birch Creek is the worst place in the world. And I thought, what the hell are you talking about? It was great. And ever since then, I have absolutely hated it. And it's the most depressing place in the world. I just hate, I don't know what it is about it, but I just hate being on Birch Creek. I've never had a good time on there since 2012, I don't think.
Yeah, I kind of had a similar experience where I thought, oh, this isn't that bad. And then I kind of we turned around and went back, I was in the 300. And then on this way back, I was like, all right, this is kind of ridiculous. Cause you just I don't know, your perception of time and you're squiggling. It's like such a it's such a, goes back and forth so much. So as the crow flies, it's not that long of a distance, but because the river winds so much, but I don't know. Is it always you've run the Quest so many times, man? I mean, it's is it almost always 40 below there? I mean,
yeah. It's true what they say. It is always 10 degrees colder there than it is in Circle or Central. And I don't recall ever being on there when it's not been minus 30 or minus 40 or something. And it's brutal. And yeah, I remember camping on there in 2020, and it was just awful. It was so cold. I sat there for 4 hours, and I wasn't going to go. I just did not want to go to sleep in those temperatures. So I just sat there for 4 hours and waited until the dogs had enough rest, and then just hit the trail. It's always seems to be brutally cold there, and like I said, it's definitely 10 degrees colder than anywhere else.
Yeah, that was a really good warm up for Iditarod for me. I was not warm, but yeah, that was man, that was the toughest 300. I don't know. That might have been my toughest 300 mile. Or I did the Copper Basin. It was really warm, so that was a whole nother.
Right.
I thought I wanted it to not be cold, but it turns out sometimes it being 30 below is better than it being 40, above.
I do think that, the Quest 300, when it starts in Fairbanks and you go over Rosebud and you go over Eagle, and then you have to run twice on Birch Creek. I think that's way tougher than Copper Basin. Yeah. Even in a cold, even when it's cold on Copper Basin, I think, you've got some pretty tough runs on that Quest 300. I remember the first year I ran, Doug Grillio was the race marshal, and he was saying that he thought you should have to qualify for the Quest 300 in a Fairbanks start because it was such a tough race. So hats off to anybody who finishes that race.
Yeah, those summits were particularly sporty. But I don't want to get too lost in the weeds here. So so just your come up stories. You worked for the British Navy, right? Or still maybe do?
No. I retired in 2009.
Okay, and then you moved to. I read your website a little bit. There's I was like, all right, I'm gonna do a little reading, and then it's like, dude, you have some awesome stories there. There's a lot of reading to be done.
Right.
Read a story about you having your zipper break in a subpar parka, and dealing with that whole ordeal. And I'm sure, that's one of many stories. But you moved to Canada, you got into the dogs, and I've always wondered, because I worked for Jeff, and we're always bragging about Alaskan Huskies and how cool they are and whatever, they're so fast and blah blah blah. But what's up? So what's up with Siberian Huskies? Talk to me about that. What's the pro? I've seen your dogs moving on the trail. They're freaking fast.
We had them in the UK. So you're right. We came to Canada in 2005, predominantly to run the Quest. But we've had Siberian Huskies since 1997, and we used to do dryland sprint in the UK. And at that time there were no Alaskan Huskies. All racing was purebred racing. So you were Siberian Huskies, Alaskan Malamutes, Inuit dogs, Samoyeds. It was just purebred dogs. And so, that's what we had, nine Siberian Huskies when we came to Canada. And I just love the breed. They're not fast like the Alaskan Huskies, but they are, obviously they're built for winter conditions. They are really beautiful dogs, and they are independently minded. And they can be challenging sometimes, and there was also, around that time, around 2004, 2005, there was all this, bullshit going on about, Siberians, and, nobody has Siberians anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think, people like, Mike and Sue Ellis in particular, but Karen Ramstead and, Blake and Jen Frecking were doing a lot to prove that, Siberians weren't particularly that slow. And that was one thing that, that we wanted to do. When I started out racing on the East Coast, we were living on the East Coast. We weren't doing particularly well, because we were really learning how to run sleds. And I became determined that, I didn't want to be that guy with the Siberians. So we learned how to train properly. We kept the same lines that we had, but we learned how to train properly and feed properly. And then, again, being British and having Siberians, I didn't want to come to the Quest and fail. I wanted, I didn't want to give people a reason why, to say why maybe I wasn't doing so well. So I spent 2011, 2012. I stayed with Lebs Frauts in Willow, spent 6 months there to do the qualifying races. And we did. It was. That winter itself was. Things just didn't go well in terms of for whatever reasons, in terms of the qualifying races for Quest. And I'd signed up for the Quest 300 from. It was a Fairbanks start year, and I was really just doing it for just to say I'd seen the trail. And all of a sudden, it became one of the qualifying races I needed to do. And in those days, there weren't many people. There weren't that many people signing up for the Quest 300 because it was a tough race. And I think there was only maybe 14 of us 11, 12 or 14 teams signed up, and I ended up coming second. And a lot of people were like, "Holy shit! What is a Siberian team doing coming second?" And so that just added that I just didn't want to come last. I didn't want to be that guy with the Siberians. So yeah, we've just stuck with them, and we've tried to do the best we possibly can. And and from time to time, you do get people will question, why don't you have faster dogs? And it always gives me a lot of pleasure to come ahead of them on the trail. People who slagged off the dogs to actually beat them. It gives me a lot of pleasure.
Yeah, I figured there's always going to be people that are trying to get their team to the finish line as fast as possible. They go a little bit too fast. They lose their speed. Or end up having to scratch. And, and and you go right by them. And I'm sure and that's not just the only people you're going by too. And my question about Siberian Huskies is like, what is like, I'm thinking, okay, they're a pure breed, but all your dogs look different. Like Alaskan Husky is like a mutt in it's in a way, it's pretty broad definition. It has the ancestors, but the ancestors are kind of Siberian Huskies because their ancestors came across the Bering Land Bridge. And so at some point they go from being Siberian to Alaskan Huskies. And then we're all like, no, Siberians are like a weaker dog or whatever. And I'm like, but isn't Alaskan Huskies once Siberian Huskies that like,
Yeah. I find it interesting. Like, I would take exception with, people who say that Alaskan Huskies are mutts. I think, you talk to people like Jeff and, and Lance in particular, and, the pedigrees behind those dogs. And that, I think you find with a lot of Alaskan drivers, they are, as big on pedigrees, if not bigger on pedigrees than Siberians. But again, to your point of dogs looking different, I mean, I think if you look at Brent's team or Jesse Royer's team, they don't, that you couldn't tell them apart. I don't think from my team in a lot of cases, it would be hard to tell them apart. So they definitely, and I think you still need those qualities, that Siberian Huskies, are supposed to have, the tough feet, the thick coats. Again, it always amuses me when we can run at -20 and -30 without jackets on, and you see some of the more handy type dogs coming past you, and they've got every item of clothing on they possibly could to keep them warm. I just think that's not for me. I'm too freaking lazy to be dressing dogs up like that all the time.
Yeah, we definitely had lots of short-coated dogs at Jeff's because he had a couple of those dogs were like a quarter German short-hair pointer. So we had this dog Zig that she'd wear a jacket and then have like a wind thing like on her neck.
Yeah.
And then like leggings on her legs, and then like flank, her flanks, she'd have a, wind protection for her belly. And I was like, wow, she looks like
it's a lot of work.
It was a pain in the ass getting her on the line. I'm like, God, Jake, you better be the bee's knees. I guess like me, that's my bad. They're not mutts. But they are just like there's like the Alaskan Husky ancestor, then the German Shorthair Pointer mixed in. Then you've got like whatever the European settlers may have purposely or not purposefully added to the mix. But of course I've been trained to say, they're bred for not their looks but their performance, their desire and drive to run and pull, their appetite, tough feet, their coat, whatever, And
that's a nice script, Sean. Hey, all right. I gotta chime in here. All right, as the resident non-mushing guy. All right. Talk to me about some key differences between Alaskan Huskies and the Siberian Huskies, because it's just interesting to hear you guys get lost on this topic. And I'm just sitting here kind of wondering to myself, like, I wonder really how much difference there is. So maybe Sean has some perspective. Maybe Rob, you have some as well.
Like I said, I mean, if you look at certain kennels, like again, I mean, Alan and Ali's dogs were really much like this. Ryan Olson's, Blake's, Jesse, Jesse Royer's, Jesse Holmes. There's not in terms of looks, there's not a huge amount of difference, and I think, I mean, it's a whole other subject, but you want a dog to run long distance. That dog needs certain qualities. It needs a certain length of leg. It needs certain, it needs to be proportioned correctly. And so, I don't think in terms of Siberians and and a lot of kennels that are doing distance, I don't think there is a great deal of difference. I think maybe if you look at, some of Martin Boosters and maybe some of Jeff's dogs as well. There's Martin's seem to stand out. I think he bred in a lot more houndier dogs, maybe back in the early 2000s. And so I think his lines are pretty distinctive. They have shorter coats. Maybe their feet are not quite as tough. I don't know. I mean, I've never run his dog, so I'm just guessing. But I mean, with Siberians, like I said, we're looking for a certain length of leg, a certain proportion. We want them to have, they've got double coats, so they stand up to the temperatures really well. For me to run my dogs in jackets, it really needs to be below minus 30 Celsius. If it's above minus 30, it's getting too warm for them. And so that's a huge bonus to be able to run without jackets down to minus 30 when, I've seen some Alaskan teams where they're, minus 4, minus 5, they're putting jackets on. And that's just not, that's not for me.
I saw that a lot in the Iditarod. I'm like, am I supposed to have jackets on my dogs right now? People have like at 20 degrees Fahrenheit, or whatever, minus 4 Celsius, I guess that is. And I'm like, but I guess like the wind sometimes, but your dogs, they got those super thick coats, and so do some Alaskan Huskies.
Oh yeah.
But, so a lot of them have shorter coats and they can still stay warm, but they need more calories.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's another thing that I remember when I signed up to do. Oh, I can't remember what it was called. It only happened one year. It was a race from Toke to Eagle and back. I think maybe it was the top of the world 300 or something. And I was supposed to sign up for it. And I'd sent my drop bags through Melinda Shaw, who used to do Mushing Tech. And so she put in my drop bags, and Jody Bailey was there and at the drop bags. And she said, wow, he's not sending anywhere near enough food. This is like, he's just, and she was only, she only knew Alaskan Huskies. And she was really questioning how much food I was sending out. But we feed probably maybe a half the amount of food that Alaskans have to feed because the dogs are so much more conditioned.
Wow.
And it's awesome.
That's probably like the most important thing you've said, like that just from a financial perspective.
Yeah.
Dude, I mean, that's the best reason to be running, these dogs that have these huge coats and they're staying warm. They're not burning as many calories.
I posted a photo a couple of weeks ago of like we feed red paw, so we have to bring it up from down south. We can't just get it here. And so I brought in a couple of tons about 6 weeks ago, and I posted a photograph, and I think it was Paige commented, and I said something that this should get us through until the end of racing season, and she's like, what, 2 tons of red paw, 2 tons of kibble is going to get you through until March? She said, that would only get us a couple of months. I said, no, that's the joys of having Siberians. You're feeding a lot less food.
Yeah. So what you're like, how specific, because like all these people that are running Alaskan Huskies, like you're not hitting them up to breed with your dogs, right? Like, you got to keep your lines separated.
Yeah.
And
that's probably the biggest thing to Brendan's point. That's probably the biggest difference is we have a completely closed gene pool, which is why Siberians are slower. Like everybody with Alaskans, and Sean, you touched on this, is you can breed, and people have, going back to the original Alaska sweepstakes, people have have bred, whippets and greyhounds and European, Euro hounds, and so that people have been able to breed Alaskan Huskies for speed. Whereas we can only, there's only a really limited gene pool. Going back to those, and they're supposed to go back to the dogs that Seppala brought in for the All Alaska back in, the early 1900s. And so, yeah, it's much harder to find good dogs to breed to. Like, as I said, there's only really been, Mike Ellis, Blake and Jen Frecking, Karen Ramstead, Hank de Bruin. So there's been very few people who've been doing distance. And so it's hard to find really good, fast dogs to breed to. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest difference is we have a completely closed gene pool. The dogs we breed to are supposed to be registered Siberian Huskies, registered with one of the kennel clubs. Whereas with Alaskans, you can breed to any dog you want. I have had people approach me in the past who wanted to use our dogs on their Alaskans to try and introduce, to bring back some of the qualities such as tougher feet and thicker coats. And again, it's actually not something that we're supposed to do. Being part of the kennel club, we're not supposed to be able to do that. So yeah.
So let me ask a follow up on that. It sounds as if the Siberians, you're a little maybe more selective because not all of them are a certain size. You kind of were talking about having a certain size, whereas like the Alaskan Huskies, like they're kind of like they're all kind of race ready or potentially race ready, or is that not correct?
Yeah, I guess in a way, I think, like I said before, you still to get a dog from Anchorage to Nome, I think a dog has to have certain qualities, and one of those has got to be efficient. And to be efficient, you need a certain length of leg. You need a certain proportion. So you can have varying heights, but a dog with really short legs and a really long body isn't going to be very, very efficient. And so, like I said, if I was to put up photographs of one of my dogs, and I've done this in presentations before, the proportions are basically the dogs may have difference in height and size and coloration, but proportionally they look very similar, and you're looking for that efficiency. But you're right. I mean, I've seen, particularly with sprint dogs, I've seen some really huge dogs. Some Eurohounds can be really big. But I think, I mean, we're definitely looking for a certain, we're looking for certain attributes when we breed. I mean, mostly now, because we've been breeding for so long, we're mostly looking for attitude, desire, work ethic, and things like that. And I'm guessing that's going to be the same with Alaskan kennels, Sean, isn't it?
Yeah, you're breeding for all those like mental things, and of course, but also like the physical, the tough feet. Like I've worked with dog teams that you're battling feet issues from September all the way through Iditarod. Right. And I've worked with teams where I didn't think of their feet one time all winter long. And, and then you've got dogs that maybe you're breeding dogs for a good appetite, but maybe you're breeding dogs because they don't really need to eat much and they are always fat, so, those kind of things. And of course, like desire and drive to run. But then there's like, just because a dog's screaming and barking and pulling really hard doesn't make him a great sled dog necessarily. Sure, go do it for 1,000 miles and then get back to us. So but yeah, so you've run the quest so many times. It's not happened in the last few years, which I'm sure you're like, oh my gosh, ready to get back out there. But you're going to run 1,000 miles one way or another this winter. But that trail is so hardy. I think Riley Dyke, he said, the Iditarod is harder to compete in and place high, but the quest is probably harder to get to the finish line, was what his take on it was. And, you know, I there's always this like ongoing conversation about the differences between those two races and the similarities too. You know, I think the biggest one, Brendan, is got to be, you know, the checkpoint count. You know, you got the same distance, you've got half the checkpoints.
Yeah.
So that can't, but that's, you know, camp your dog team, you know, a couple times between checkpoints. You know, a good musher, that's not even a big deal. You know. But yeah, what is your like, what is the lure of the quest? Because clearly you love that race because you've been in it so many times. You sign up to suffer over and over.
I mean, I just want to go back to your first point. I mean, a lot of people say that, oh yeah, the quest is tougher than the Iditarod. And you know, Sean, you know better than me that the Iditarod can be, when the Iditarod wants to be, it is a tough race. I think they're both, you know, they've both got their pros and they've both got their cons. Why I love the quest, I think because it is fewer checkpoints, because it is more remote. I think the first time I did Iditarod, I think 2015, I think that was the year there was maybe 80 or 90 teams, and the quest had been something like 15 teams. And so like 2015, the 2015 quest, I was ended up last, and I left Dawson. The team that was behind me scratched. It was a super cold year, and there was like 8 or 9 teams had scratched before in the first 400 miles. And so I left Dawson. I thought there was a team behind me, but effectively I was in last place, and I didn't see another dog team until I got to the finish line. So, you know, over 500 miles without seeing another dog team on the Iditarod, like, and we started in Fairbanks that year. It was a cold year, but I said there was 80 to 90 teams, and every time you stopped, you were just surrounded by teams. Like it was, you know, you'd camp and there were teams everywhere. You get into a checkpoint. Like I didn't stop in the first 2 checkpoints because, you know, I think it was Squentner. I was a mile away from Squentner and I could just hear the dogs in the checkpoint, the screaming of the dogs. And I just thought, I'm not stopping there. You know, we went on about another 10 miles before we camped. And even in White Mountain that year, so like 900 miles into the race, there were so many teams. And it's just, I just prefer being on my own. I prefer, you know, if I want to stop and snack the dogs, I don't need 20 teams around me with all the dogs trying to dive in and steal my snacks. And yeah. And so I think that's the appeal. It's, you know, it's the same with Iditarod. Every year is different. Every year on the quest, there was a different challenge. Like the first year, 2013, it was warm. It was easy. I couldn't, you know, and I've said this many times, that maybe if I got to the finish line and thought, what was all the fuss about? Why has everybody said this is the toughest race in the world? And maybe if that had been tougher that first year, I wouldn't have been an idiot and gone back, because every year after that, something, you know, like I said, 2015 was brutally cold. I don't know, I get confused over the years. 2017, Brian Wilmshurst and I had a nightmare. We got caught in a storm on top of Rosebud. 2019, we had a mare on Eagle Summit. 2018 was the year that Riley ran it, and I remember we were camping between Eagle and Clinton Creek, and we were camping. You know, we camped high above 40 Mile, and it was -50, and it was brutal. I mean, there was myself, Riley, and Dave Dalton. We just spent the whole time like trying to feed the fire to keep us warm. And, you know, 2020, the race warmed up, and I ended up in a ton of overflow. You know, some of the worst overflow I've ever. So every year is different. But you know, the same with Iditarod. Every year is, you know, different on Iditarod. And like I said, you like how close were you to the finish line when you hit that? You know, just outside safety, and to hit those conditions just outside safety. It makes me laugh when people try to say that Iditarod is easy, because it is absolutely not easy. And probably the worst part of Iditarod is those final 300 miles, you know, when things to start getting easier. So,
yeah, that is true.
And my heart broke for you. You know, watching
Dude.
you guys, you know, just outside safety, it was just heartbreaking to see what was going on.
Yeah, there was some rookie moments in there, but it was also, you know, some pretty wild overflow, and it was crazy. I'll never forget like lifting up from the helicopter and driving. You know, we're going straight to Nome right over the trail, and you just see like literally like several hundred of these like lakes of overflow that we got stuck in like 3 of them. You know, and we were like, all right, we got through one. Like, I think we're out of it now. It turns out we would have been doing that for ever. But
I mean, you said it was a rookie mistake. It's not a rookie. I mean, you had Matt with you. I mean, one of the most experienced out there. I mean, Christ,
you just get like, I think the rookie aspect of it for me was like, just like, you know, I'm immediately like, my legs get numb, and I'm like, all right, like I need this scratched right now, you know, instead of like, all right, why don't I just take my like clothes off and get my sleeping bag and sleep, like take a nap. The dog, like it was fucking 25 above, you know, Fahrenheit. You know, your dogs are fine. They don't need straw for a 2-hour nap in that temperature. And just take a, you know, hindsight 2020, whatever. But, you know, just take a breather for a second and wake up to the sunshine and see what is your situation actually. Because it's like 4 a.m. and we're just like, no idea, you know, how bad or good this situation is. But Matt's no rookie. You know, Noelmeyer isn't a rookie. But you know, it's, you just kind of, those head spaces you get in when you're sleep deprived and cold, and it's like, you just start to panic pretty quickly. You know, and I just wish I would have stayed a little more even keeled a little bit maybe. But you know, a lot of people's races end in that section of trail. You know, it happens the next couple of years to some rookies.
So, you know, we're talking about the Iditarod, and it has me thinking related to you, Rob, like kind of taking us back a little bit to like how you even got into mushing. You know, I know that you were doing it over in the UK and doing the dry land stuff, but like where does mushing even begin for you?
I mean, it goes back to really being in the military, and I was going away a lot, we wanted a dog to keep my wife company when I was going away at sea, and we used to do a lot of mountaineering, and so we wanted dogs that could come mountaineering with us when I was back in the UK, my wife's father sent us a photograph of a dog in a backpack, and I thought, wow, that's got to be the dog for us. If a dog could put a backpack on, it can carry its own weight and carry its own food, and it was a husky, and we thought that's it's going to be able to withstand the conditions we're going to see up on top of the mountains, and so we ended up thinking that was the dog for us. And at the time, this was 1996, 1997. It was pretty hard to get hold of Siberian Huskies in the UK. You needed to know people who had them, and you needed recommendations. Breeders just wouldn't sell them to you. And so we were put in touch with some people who lived fairly near us, and they had about 10 Siberian Huskies. And so they came to visit us and to assess us, to make sure that we were suitable. And we went to their kennel a few times. And they said, they used to do dog shows, and to keep their dogs in condition for dog shows, they would run them on a 3-wheel rig. And they said, why don't you, come along with us and see, and I looked at it and I thought, wow, this looks like a lot of fun. And Huskies are, they are like most dogs, I guess they're pack animals. So you can't just get one, you need 2. And so I got 2, and we got a cart to train them, to keep them fit. And we went to a race, and I did one race, and I was hooked. I just, we pretty much stopped mountaineering. And we had, at the time, we had 2 Siberian Huskies, and so I wanted more. And we, and it was the intention was just to do this dry land sprint racing in the UK. So it was only like 3 or 4 miles on a 3-wheel cart going around forest trails on a Saturday morning. And then it was about 2003, 2004, and this really showing my age. The internet was was really in its infancy. And I remember following this race. We would follow the Iditarod, and I remember finding this other race called the Yukon Quest, and there was a guy on his rookie year called Lance Mackey, and I read his bio. I thought, wow, if this guy can run dogs, I can do it. And I just thought, can I take my own dogs and go and run this race? And and I managed to get an exchange posting in the Canadian Air Force, a 3-year exchange posting. So we came to Canada with the dogs, and the intention always was to try and do the Yukon Quest. So when I was recalled after 3 years, I said, no, I'm not going back to the UK. I fell in love with Canada. I loved, by this time we were doing mid-distance racing, and I loved it. And that was, we just stayed in Canada, and then slowly made our way to, like I said, to Alaska, and then to the Yukon.
That's an interesting story. I have a couple of follow-up questions for you on that. So first thing I'm wondering is dryland mushing, is there a scene for that in the UK? Is it big? Is it like huge, or?
It's surprisingly big. The biggest race we would do every year was Aviemore, and I believe this year is actually going to be the final one, which is pretty sad. But it was up in the Cairngorms, up in the Highlands of Scotland, and like I said before, it was only purebred dogs. It was only purebred teams that were allowed, and you would get in excess of 200 teams racing. So it was massive, but we could race pretty much, if we wanted to, every weekend from November through until March. And there were different race organizations. There was like the Siberian Husky Club of Great Britain, the Siberian Husky Club of Scotland, the British Siberian Husky Racing Association, and all these different. So there were probably 5 or 6 different race organizations, and they would operate in different parts of the country. So you could, if you wanted to, you could travel every weekend to different races. And some races you'd only maybe have 10 or 15 teams. But like I said, the Aviemore race, there'd be 200 teams there. There'd be other races where you get 50 or 60 teams. So yeah, and it's still a big thing. It's still a big thing now. So yeah, there was a really big scene, I guess. So, yeah.
And while we're on that topic, I'm curious, is there a standard amount of dogs in terms of those races that you're allowed to have? I think you said 3. Is that the usual size, or?
There were different classes, and you would compete in different classes, so that you'd have, at that time, it was 2-dog class, 3-dog class, 4-dog, and 6-dog. And I think now these days there's also scooter classes with 1 or 2 dogs, and I think there's also an 8-dog class, and these rigs are really lightweight. People want the rigs to be as light as possible, and I think it's suicidal. I used to find 6 challenging, but 8 on a lightweight rig, I think you need some pretty good leaders. You need them to stop when you tell them. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm assuming they're going maybe a little bit faster than 10 miles an hour.
Yeah. You look at, you're up to like 25, 26 miles an hour. Yeah.
Yeah, that is terrifying. Even if I go, like, I don't know, when I first started working for Jeff, he was like, dude, if you run my dogs too fast, I'm going to kill you. And I was like, so I couldn't go over, like, in my brain, I just couldn't go over 8 miles an hour for ever. And then it took me. So like, if I go 14 miles an hour down a hill or whatever, I'm like, oh my God, this is just, and to think 26, I'm like, oh God.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
I think that always amuses me. Like, people think that we're trying to go as fast as possible. You talk to somebody, say, oh, what are you doing in training? I said, well, I never go over 8 miles an hour. They said, that's ridiculous. I said, it's not. That's what the successful people are doing. They're training their dogs to run at 8 miles an hour or 9 miles an hour, but they're making it happen for 1,000 miles. And it was an interesting point you said earlier on. Like, I remember, like, Copper Basin, I think is a quality race. The first 100 miles at Copper Basin, you see these teams, they come flying past you. And and if you let it, it can be quite demoralizing. But I realized after a couple of years that 150 miles into the race, you're going to be passing them, and they're going to be sat by the trail, and they don't know how to get their dogs going. And again, you mentioned this before, that once the speed's gone, the speed's gone. You're not getting that, unless you're somebody like John Chandlermeyer or something, you're not getting that speed back. You've screwed it for the rest of the race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. And I when I ran that Copper Basin, that was like teams were dropping like flies. I think it was like almost half of them scratched, and I had like a super young team, and we lost our speed for sure. We were down to like at the fastest 6 miles an hour,
right.
And I just never mushed at 6 miles an hour, and it was just like. That's like a big. I mean, you're adding like 3 hours to like your run time.
Yeah,
like that. It's what you think is it's a 50-mile run or 60-mile run. Like that'll be like 7 hours. It's like no, now it's 10. And that's like it's demoralizing in itself. And then I remember I learned the lesson of like don't call up your dogs unless you really, really, really need it. Because I did it. I was like I'd be going up the hump. Or whatever, I'd be like, all right, guys, good job. And then they'd go up and I'd be like, oh, sick. That's kind of cool. And then I did it like, the next round and they're like, look back like, dude, this is our speed now. Like, we're not going any faster than this. So you can kindly shut the hell up. And I was like, all right, fair enough, But yeah, that was, I didn't see like any country that whole race because it was just white out the whole time. And I'm sure it's beautiful, but I didn't see anything at all the whole time. I remember 2018, I've handled for that Yukon Quest for Alex Buto, and I was very cold just from, and I was the guy that got to go into the heated truck when I got cold, and it's like Dawson City was like 40 below the whole time, like every checkpoint was like 30, 40 below, and that was. Yeah, I was just thinking of that experience when you were talking about that, and then you said like 80 and 90 mushers. That's like I like wasn't around mushing back then, and I've never seen an Iditarod over 50, and that's just such an insane amount. Like when I ran with 40 mushers, I thought that was pretty that was pretty crowded, and then. I'm thinking, what is the difference? Like, what do you think about like the loneliness of you don't get to see your homies at the checkpoint as far as like your handling team, your wife or whatever, or whoever, and the Iditarod, you can see some other yahoos that are in the Iditarod, sure.
Right.
But you're not seeing, your crew.
Yeah. I think that's another good point actually, which, isn't focused on enough. I think they like that. If you have a good handler, from handling for Alex, if you have a good handling team, they can really make a difference. To come into a checkpoint and see a happy, smiling face, somebody who's a friendly face, and they can make that. They can really change your attitude. And you're right, you don't get that on the Iditarod. You see other mushers, and there's obviously a lot of volunteers, but it's not the same. Having a really good handling, a really good team of handlers can make a massive difference. I had James Wild, who's he's in the army. He came across a number of years, and he was fantastic. He just knew me. He was like this sort of I don't know psychic link between us. He knew when to lift me. He knew when to leave me alone, and it makes a massive difference. On the quest, you have that stretch where you leave Dawson, and you've got the remote checkpoint in Eagle, which is I think is 140 miles, and then you have 160 miles from Eagle to Circle, and so you've got 300 miles where you're not seeing your checkpoint crew, and then to come into Circle and see your checkpoint crew, it just lifts you, and you've just spent. Talk about how bad Birch Creek is, but you just spend 300 miles on the Yukon River, or pretty much 300 miles on the Yukon River, and that can be pretty demoralizing. So to then see your checkpoint crew, your handlers that is a big difference, which people don't realize. I mean, you can have your handlers or your family fly out to checkpoints, but it's bloody expensive on Iditarod. So that's a big plus that people don't think about.
So you have a lot of incredibly accomplished dogs. And I think you also have a couple of pretty funny names. Like I learned that the word ash is spelled ARSE in British for you. And A. B, I remember like 2 years ago seeing a Facebook video of one of your lead dogs. And I think we talked about this in a previous podcast. I was talking about your dog. One of your lead dogs that you put in wheel on the back of the team, and the whole team's just cranked up to go, barking and screaming, except for one dog, this lead dog, who's always in lead, and put him in wheel. And he literally wouldn't even look wouldn't even look at you, would look at the ground down to the left and was like, screw you, dude. This is some bullshit. You know, I'm a leader.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the names, I mean, Arseface and Cockwomble. I mean, then there's Lard Arse, and there was Bowlocks was another one from that litter. And it just, I mean, the complaints you get on social media, it's hilarious. And that's, that part of the reason is to get, is to piss people off on social media. And it's like,
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, it's slightly different. I think it was the third litter we bred. We called them atheists. We called them after atheists. And so there was one was after Christopher Hitchens and one was Richard Dawkins. And there was a post after I think it was after the 2015 Iditarod, where somebody said on social media that she thought I had fantastic looking dogs, but she could never support me, and she could never support my dogs because I was an atheist and I called them after atheists. And so I wasn't giving them the spiritual support that they required. And the dogs, this person couldn't get it through their head. The dogs don't give a shit what they're called. They don't care. A dog, I think, from my perspective, like a dog's name needs to be simple. It just needs one or two syllables. So Arseface is perfect, two syllables. And two quick, one of those, going back to Copper Basin, one of the other reasons we do it is, as you know, when you put in your bios for races, they always ask what your lead dog's names are. I can't remember which year it was at Copper Basin, but I put down that Arseface and Cockwomble were going to be my two leaders. And so nobody ever reads these before they hand them over to the announcers. And Copper Basin is in Glen Allen. It's a really religious community. You can't buy alcohol actually within the confines of the community. So many churches, such a religious community. And not only did the announce, this was also going out on local radio and it was going out on the internet worldwide. And the announcer, he read out, that Rob's lead dogs are Cockwomble and Arseface. And it was just so funny. And the same happened on the Quest. But on the Quest, that must have been 2018 as well, because it was starting Fairbanks. And it was, I don't know if you remember Ryan Hughes, who was a big volunteer. He was one of Brent's big sponsors, but he was the president of the Quest for a while, and he was doing the announcing that year, announcing the start, and he took great pleasure in announcing the fact that Arseface and Cockwomble were on the team. So yeah,
oh my god, that's awesome.
The names are meaningless. It amuses me, and it offends some people, and so I think that's good.
Good. I like you. Sometimes you just gotta offend some people. That's what that's their problem. But why don't you highlight a couple veteran dogs that probably have like 7 1,000-mile races under their belt, and B, maybe a couple of up and coming younger dogs, or maybe just a cool story of a dog that you thought was like probably shouldn't be on my team and then did really well or carried us or whatever.
I think we've got. I'd have to go back and look. There's definitely 2 dogs which have finished 9 1,000-mile races. They've obviously retired now, Nutter and Looney. So there was our second litter with the Crazies, and there were 5 in the litter, and it was Maddie, Psycho, Nutter, Looney, and Skits, and they were the core of my team for a long time. Like I said, Nutter and Looney finished 9,000-mile races, but their litter mates, I think between the litter, there's something like 40 or 42,000-mile finishes between them. And 3 of them, I mean, they're 14 years old now, so 3 of them are still with us. The female from that litter, Maddie, she's the one you were talking about before. She was my main leader, the best leader I ever had. she pretty much ran. We wouldn't have finished the 15 and the 17 quests if it not been for her. She on the 15 quest, she ran about 500 miles in single lead when I couldn't get any other dog to lead. She was in single lead, and she was the one. She would get so pissed off with me if she wasn't in lead, and if I put her in wheel, I remember I think it was 2017. I had females in heat, and so I could, you know what it's like. If you got females in heat, you either put them at the front of the team, or where the males can't get to them, or you put them at the back of the team where you can get to the males before the males can get to them. So she wasn't in heat, but she was running next to a female in heat. So I had her in wheel, and she was so angry with me. She would get so pissed off with me if she wasn't in lead, and to put her in wheel was just the ultimate insult. And she wouldn't look at me. It was, up and coming. so that was Maddie. We bred her twice. My 3 main leaders for this winter are puppies from her, and they've been my main leaders since about 2018. So that's Benny, Wiz, and in fact, Lucy's not racing this year. She's just had puppies. And then up and coming again, we had a litter of 5 again from Maddie, and they were named after the Avengers. My wife was getting pissed off with the swear words for names, so they were Stark, Banner, Wanda, Natasha, and Parker. And I think that's all cool. 5 of those, they're really good. They're really good leaders, and so they are the youngest that we have in training. They're still 4 years old, but I think they're all going to be on the race team this year. A dog that I can't think of a dog which I mean there's one from the Swearers litter, so Lazarus Lazy Ass, from that Swearers litter. He was technically dead, I guess, when the litter was born, and we worked on him for about 10 minutes and actually managed to revive him. And he's turned into a great leader. He finished the quest in 2020. And so, I guess he's a good story. That
is amazing.
So we probably have about 10 minutes left before we wrap things up. And, I wanted to bring up the Iditarod. It's been a 5-year hiatus since you've been in the race. Have you been mainly focusing on Canadian races, or has there been any reason behind that?
It's going to be interesting. Like 2018 was the last time I did Iditarod, and again, I mean that was the year Alex ran the quest. You know what the quest was like. That was a tough year, and the dogs were in good shape at the end of the quest, and I wasn't. I was mentally done. We should never have gone to Iditarod. And again, I talked about the handler James. We were at the Willow start, and I turned around to him and I said, I don't want to start. Like we were minutes away, and I said, I don't want to go. I don't want to do this race. And that was so I started the race, and he thought I was joking. I really wasn't. I should have not started the race. My attitude was so bad. And we scratched. We left Coltag. Is it Coltag? Yeah. And got to Tripod Flats cabin, and I sat in that cabin, and I thought, I just don't want to be here anymore. I'm not going any further. So I hit the button, turned around, and went back to Coltag and scratched. And I figured then I'd had enough of racing. I didn't want to race anymore. And then I did go and do the quest again in 2019 and 2020. The 3 Iditarods that we'd done, so 15, 16, and 18, we'd always run the quest beforehand. And I thought, I wondered what it would be like to actually just do the Iditarod without having run the quest beforehand. So, I was going in with a better frame of mind. The dogs may not be in quite such good shape, but I would be in a better frame of mind. So we signed up, I think, for the Iditarod in 2021, I think it was, and then ended up not going. We didn't have a good training year. Things weren't going well, and I wasn't prepared to take a not prepared team to Iditarod. And then last winter, I just took the winter off completely. We did some training. I probably did maybe 800 miles training, and it was so nice to take the winter before I'd done the quest. We tried to do Copper Basin. I ended up not running Copper Basin. I scratched on the Quest 300. Just again, my mind wasn't in the right place. And so I took last winter off completely and we did some training, some fun. And I think I'm in a better place mentally and that's why we signed up for Iditarod this year. I think I'm in a better place mentally. We'll see how it is when we get to March. It's still a long way off, but training's been going all right. We started training in May, and we've been taking it really easy. I mean, I think individual dogs have got about 70 training runs on them at the moment, and they've got just over 1,000 miles, which is okay. But we've been taking it really easy, training all the way through the summer. And now things are going to start ramping up, try and get some camping trips in. And we're also, we're going to do the Cusco as well. Maybe the Two Rivers 200, and depending on how finances are going and how things go with Iditarod, I'd like to do Kobuk as well. I've said this so many times before. I think this is going to be my final 1,000 mile race. If Iditarod goes all right, this is a whole new bunch of dogs. Some of these dogs were on the 2018 team, and they got as far as Tripod Flats, which is whatever that is, 700 miles. But none of these are finishers. So it's going to be nice to try and get as many new dogs to the finish line. And then there's a bunch of races down south that I'd like to go back to the Can-Am, which is a fun race in Fort Kent. I never did the Bear Grease. That would be a fun one to do that. The Canadian Challenge I'd like to try and do. So I think this will be the final. Hopefully this will be the final 1,000 mile race here, and then we'll just do some shorter races. And it's also, I'm 57, and it gets harder and harder to motivate yourself. Like yesterday, I did a 5-hour run yesterday. And I got home at 9 o'clock at night. Then I had to make supper. Then I had to feed the dogs. And I needed to go. I live off grid, so I then needed to go and cut some wood. And I didn't get to bed until 2 o'clock this morning. I'm too old for this shit. I just taking last winter off was nice. So to have an intense winter this winter will be good. But then to ramp things back and do some shorter racing, hopefully next winter.
Yeah, every mushers has said it before as my last Iditarod, my last and then you see him again next year. But that sounds like you sound pretty serious about it. And we learned about some of these races to the south of you from talking to Connor last week. Right, and I also just wanted to real quick touch on, like, you're in a pretty an incredible company of mushers and dogs, those dogs that did it, to have run the Yukon Quest 1000 and finished that, and then gone on to finish the Iditarod. And the end of the Yukon Quest is like 2 weeks from the start of the Iditarod. And
it's about 2 weeks.
That is an amazing turnaround. Some people might argue that the dogs are in better shape going into the Iditarod, having done that, than having not done that. And Lance Mackey kind of made that super famous to have gone on and won 2 quests and then 2 Iditarods this same year. 4 of each in a row too. But talk about running the Yukon Quest and then 2 weeks later the Iditarod. And
this is it's definitely bragging. We're the only Siberian Husky team that's ever finished both in the same winter. And we did, like I said, we did it in 2015 and 2016. Mike Ellis came really close in 2014. But and you're right, it's good company. I think I was the 32nd person ever to do it, and there's not been that many more since. It is definitely better. I mean, people think people's first reaction is, oh, it must be cruel for the dogs, but it's really not. 2 weeks, you have to keep the dogs ticking over in that 2 weeks time, but you're starting the race with dogs which are in condition. They are race ready. They're not so likely to get injuries. I don't think it's really the musher who is the weak link. And I remember in 2015, it was a white horse start year on the quest, so we finished in Fairbanks, and it was also that was the year we actually started in Fairbanks. So we had to be 2 weeks wasn't enough to stay in Fair. It was too long to stay in Fairbanks. So we drove home back to Whitehorse, which is like a 14-hour drive, and then we had to drive. Yeah, we still had the ceremonial start in Anchorage. So we still, 2 weeks later, we had to drive to Anchorage for the ceremonial start. Then they gave us a couple of days to drive up to Fairbanks for the actual real restart. And we got caught in this unbelievable storm through Denali. It was incredible. There were like trucks off the road everywhere. Anyway, I remember I was having I couldn't after the 2015 quest, I was having like nightmares every night, like these constant nightmares about, you could be doing exams at school, or you could be in a road race. There was always a competition. You were always trying to get somewhere. You're always, each dream was different, but you're always trying to achieve a goal. And I think it was because, I came last in the quest that year. And the way getting to every checkpoint was just amazing. I'd to say to myself, right, I'm going to get to the next checkpoint and I'm going to scratch. And so that's how I got to the finish line. I just said I'd get to the next checkpoint and then scratch. So I was having nightmares for 2 weeks after the quest, every single night. I just wasn't sleeping properly. And the nightmares stopped 2 days before the start of the Iditarod. And that was the first night I slept properly, was the Thursday before the Iditarod. I can't remember what it was like in 2016, but like I said, 2018, I just didn't recover. The 2018 race, the 2018 quest had been so tough that I just mentally, I didn't recover. And I was just not in a good place at the start of Iditarod. And like so the dogs are in super good condition. The dogs could easily have finished that race, but I was just done. I think mentally as well, my attitude was also starting to reflect on the dogs mentally as well. It's tough. And I mean, for like you said that Lance twice, won both races. That to be it just shows just what a fantastic dog person he was. That he could just to win one race is amazing, but to do it back to back twice. And then to be dealing with, all the issues that he was dealing with, the fact that he had to, find ways to keep hydrated and keep his water from freezing, and then to win both races back to back is just, it just shows what an incredible guy he really was, as a person and as a dog person.
Crazy, man. Thinking about turning around and running. I mean, you get to the finish line of the quest, it's like, oh, all right, dude, season's over. I would think that's what I would want, and to go back and right back out into it. And it's not going to necessarily be any easier. Yeah, that's an amazing accomplishment. Brennan?
No, I think that, we've hit about an hour, and that kind of ending on that Lance story might be a nice little spot for us. I usually always like to remind our guests, if anyone of our listeners wants to follow you or support you, just give you a moment to promote yourself a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks very much. If you send me the link to the podcast, I'll push it out on social media pages as well. So, I mean, we're a kennel. I think we have 48 dogs at the moment. So it's not a cheap evolution. So any support is great. I actually put out I've been pretty slow this year. I put out a couple of sponsorship posts this morning. So you can, our website is shaitansiberians.com, and you can find me on social media. I have a personal account, Rob Cooke, and a kennel page as well, which is again Shaitan Siberian Huskies, I think. is the Facebook, and I mostly, I mean, I do have Instagram as well, but I mostly use. I think it's probably an age thing. I mostly use Facebook. I think I don't have TikTok.
Yeah,
I wouldn't even know how that works.
I mean, us, I don't think we do either. And hey, thanks so much for joining us, man, and taking the time to talk to us. And I'm looking forward to
fun.
Yeah, this has been a fun talk. And and I'll see you in Anchorage in a few months. And yeah, thank you so much, Rob.